Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, welcome to the show. This is the Millennial Millionaire Podcast, and I am your host, Stephen Cohen. This podcast is focused on bringing some of the wisest minds from across the globe to discuss concepts, strategies, and ideals that will lead them to be top performers in their respective industries and their lives. This show is for the millennials and millennials at heart to transcend their mindset, their health, and their income to the next level. We are so excited to have you on this journey with us. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the Millennial Millionaire Podcast. This is your host, Stephen Cohen, for another episode. Happy New Year. This is, I believe, either the first or second episode that I'll be viewing in 2025. So I hope everyone had an amazing New Year. Much prosperous, abundance time. For today's guest, we have Joe Jensen. Joe, similar to me, has been in the direct sales space for over a decade. He's transitioned over to be a real estate investor. He has over 50 units. He's the host of the Real Estate Investing School, the author of Healthy Plus Happy Children, book and song. Just a really good guy, an amazing person, a father, a mentor to many, and stoked to finally have you on the show, dude.
Dude, I'm glad to be here, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, for those that don't know who you are, give a quick little brief intro and we'll dive in.
Yeah, Joe Jensen. I grew up out in kind of middle of nowhere, right on the Utah-Nevada border. There's this national park out there. It has the largest cave system in the Western Hemisphere, the Great Basin National Park. No one's ever heard of it. Like, that's how remote it is. It's funny. It has a national park and everybody's like never even been there. But yeah, so really, really remote. And then I got into summer sales, the door-to-door, selling alarm systems back in like 2010, I think it was my first year.
OG.
Yeah, like back in the early days. My first few systems were connecting to phone lines to call the police. They weren't even cell systems yet. So yeah, that ages me a little bit there. But yeah, I did a decade of that and then switched to real estate and really tried to build like a life of freedom. That's kind of always been like my brand and my goal and my mission with all of it. Was, some guys have this like itch to just build infinitely forever and just never stop hustling and grinding, which is like pretty dope because you can accomplish some pretty amazing things. That was never me. It was always a means to an end of like building a life of freedom. And so that's kind of been my focus a lot now, is doing that for myself and helping others do it and just kind of like raise my kids the right way and just enjoying life. I love the outdoors, rock climbing, mountain biking, snowboarding. That's where I get my play in, and it's great.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you say that because I agree. I think people go through different levels of motivation. We are kind of cut from the same cloth in terms of direct sales. You started before I did, but I think a lot of people that get involved in a door-to-door direct sales, 100% commission industry have that desire, whether it's for a better life, maybe they want a nice car, a nice house, nicer vacations, want to support their family. But I think once you accomplish that, it goes from more of a monetary motivation to more of I want to be free. I want to work when I want, whenever I want. I don't want to have to be told what to do. I can do the things that I want to do without having to ask permission. My question for you, Joe, is what is freedom in your perspective? I think a lot of people like the idea of freedom, but they haven't actually put enough thought into designing and calculating what that looks like for them.
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's interesting. Two thoughts I had. I don't know if you've ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yep.
If anybody, is listening, go check it out. You can Google it. But it's basically this pyramid, and the bottom is like survival, right? Like your basic needs, like shelter. And then it goes up to like love and connection and self-actualization. And there's all these different levels. And you kind of see that in people's growth in their business. But some people kind of get stuck in that first level sometimes, and they're like, you can get out of the survival mode. Like, you're good, dude. Like, you have a freaking like Rolex and a nice car and a beautiful mansion. Like, you don't have to be in survival mode, but their nervous system doesn't know how to survive outside of it. But anyway, that's kind of a side note. But freedom, I think it was Maya Angelou who said, it's not freedom from obligation we seek, but freedom to choose our obligations. And I really like that, because sometimes we think freedom is, I can just do whatever. But that, I've been there, and a lot of people have been there. It just kind of feels like almost uncomfortable. It's like you don't want to just do whatever. You want to do what you want to do. And so the key point in freedom is knowing what you want to do, choosing the obligations you choose, not being forced to do stuff you hate or what other people want for you.
I love that. Let's talk a little bit about survival because you brought it up. I think it's interesting because I agree. There's a lot of people that are in our space, or probably that me and you both know are really in many different industries. And I've even fallen into it myself in different seasons of my life where you come into an opportunity and you start making money. Maybe you go from making $80,000 a year to $150,000 a year, $250,000 a year, or even $400,000-$500,000 a year, depending where you live in the country. Could be a lot or maybe a little if you live in California. But nothing changes in terms of their beliefs. And like you said, their nervous system is still conditioned to live paycheck to paycheck, and they're still in a survival mode. Maybe they have nicer things, but they're still in a position where maybe they're worried about how they're going to make their payment. You make more money, you get a nicer car, nicer house, nicer apartment, and then your lifestyle goes up. Talk to me a little bit about how do people actually shift from survival to a freedom or thriving perspective?
Yeah, I mean, so it's all about having a safety margin, really, to have true freedom. It's like you're not tied down, right? If you think of the opposite of freedom is like captivity, like being in a prison, right? And so I think of three main buckets of freedom. I think there's like mental freedom, which I would tie like emotional, spiritual is all kind of in that bucket for me personally. Mental freedom, and then there's physical freedom, right? To be able to do what you want physically, like if you want to go run a marathon, you're able to. You want to get up, walk around, go hike. Whatever, there's physical freedom, and then there's financial freedom. Those are kind of the three buckets. I'm sure you could carve it however you want, but that's how I do it. And the financial freedom obviously is a big one. And the main way is like if you didn't have to work again for the rest of your life or couldn't, like, are you good? Can you continue your lifestyle? I would say that's financially free. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, it does.
But I could expand more. But
so let's talk a little bit about that, because I agree. There's a lot of people that have a lot of money, but maybe they are constrained or they're chained down by their emotions or their thoughts in their body. Do you feel like there's one more important than the other? Do you feel like you need to have a type of freedom or focus on that specific area of your life in order to unlock the other? Does one come first? Like, do you need financial freedom to then work on your spirituality, or do they happen kind of cohesively, do you think?
I mean, I don't think there's a set way. It's different for everybody. Like, you can find mental and physical freedom before financial. You can find financial first. You listen to a lot of these, people who become really successful, little podcasts and book stuff. And a lot of people who have made it, like, financially, right? They're very, very financially free. That's when they, like, step back and they're like, oh, like, I'm a wreck. Like, my life's a mess. And then they go and they get really fit and they get really smart and they go do some ayahuasca and go meditate. And they're like, oh my gosh, like, there's a whole world outside of money. And who knew? Like, that seems to be the route for a lot of people. But it works the other, it doesn't have to work that way. It can work the other way as well. There's no rhyme or reason to how you can do it. So you can do it wherever you're at. But I will say money can, if you spend your money correctly or effectively, like, it can facilitate all the other freedoms, you know what I mean? It can be a lot easier to find all those other things if you have the money to pay for a gym membership and healthy food and have time to make your meal and get stem celled if you need to. And money can just obviously facilitate anything you want it to facilitate, good or bad.
Yeah, Jim Rohn says money is not the most important thing in the world, but it's right up there with oxygen.
Yeah.
It's pretty freaking important. And even for my own life, I kind of went through that same rhythm where I was always money motivated, because growing up I didn't have any. And I saw the lack of freedom my parents had and the pain and the constraint that had on our joy, happiness, and flexibility. So naturally growing up, I wanted to run away from that or towards earning money, figuring out how to earn money. That's why I was always involved in certain things, reading books around high caliber people. I always knew that was important from an early age. And I started making a little bit of money, but I noticed that even though my income went up, my freedom didn't go up. And I really want to touch on that, because there's a lot of people listening to this podcast that are making good money, but they're still in that same paycheck to paycheck mentality.
Yeah.
Can you talk through a little bit how you went from being in the direct sales space and finally starting to make a good income from yourself, but didn't just stop at that, also started learning how to create freedom, whether that's through the investing or if it's a mindset or whatever you facilitated?
Yeah, it's interesting. So a couple thoughts. One thought, I grew up really poor. Like, I was never around high performers. I didn't know that world at all. Like, everybody in my family is very, very poor, like 20, 30,000 a year. We're not, like, very minimal. And they'd always talk about, and this seems to be very narrative among people without a lot of money, like, oh, money doesn't matter. Like, money's not important. Money's not important. And then I would look and see that almost every decision people was making was tied to their lack of money. You know what I mean? Like, the car they drove, where they lived, the schools they went to, the charities they contributed to, the hobbies they had, like, the way they did, like, everything was tied to their money. And I was like, well, if I don't control money, money's going to control me. And so I kind of had to break the mold of where I came from to go and like prioritize making money, not so that I could have a ton of money, but just so that the lack of it wouldn't be controlling my life. And so then I got in and started making decent money. And I never made the big bucks. I was never bringing in $1 million a year. You know, like I'm a millennial millionaire if you go by net worth, but I'm not bringing in $1 million a year today. And I wasn't, 5 years ago, I never was. But once I started making decent money where I could start to control it, the hard thing is there are a few addictions that are more enticing than luxury. And most people choose luxury over freedom. And I'm not saying there's a right or a wrong to do it, but it's very hard to give up a certain standard of living and choose freedom over that when you could just have bigger and better and nicer. And we're kind of programmed to do that. And so everybody's got to kind of decide their own balance of luxury and freedom. And some don't have to choose because they're able to get big enough, sell a business, have an awesome exit. Once you have hundreds of millions, I don't think a couple billion more is going to really change your lifestyle that much. But even then, the biggest thing is to prioritize your true priorities. And a lot of people don't do that. They prioritize the opportunity. They prioritize their effectiveness. They prioritize their skill, or they prioritize their fear, or whatever it may be. But if they'd really sit back, and I've been doing this a lot because, like I said, this is like the New Year's, and it's like the past couple weeks, I've been like, what are my true priorities? Not what I say should matter to me, but what really does matter to me the most. And when you can really start to prioritize that, then you can start to change and say no to deals and walk away from things and miss things that would bring you money if you're in a position to prioritize the other things. But if you're in such a tight bind where you don't have money, then it's like you can't prioritize your priorities anyway because you can't put food on the table. And that's where the money is next to air, because if you don't have it, you can't do all the other things you love, But no one wants to sit around and just breathe air, and no one wants to sit around and just make money. It's what do those let us do? And then that takes like introspection and like figuring out what you love and what matters to you, and that's a lot harder work than just grinding.
Yeah, I want to stay on this topic because I think it's really important.
Yeah, let's dive into it.
So you said that you've never made, millions of dollars in a year, but you consistently made good money. And from what it sounds like, rather than maybe getting that new car, getting that new house, maybe that designer belt, those nice vacations, maybe you had a balance of that, but that wasn't the priority. You knew from a really early age in your professional career that, hey, there's going to be a lot of people around me that increase their lifestyle. There's going to be a lot of flexing going on. And in order for me not to fall into the urge and the Jones effect of me wanting to play that game as well, I need to get crystal clear on what I want and make sure that my North Star is targeting at financial freedom, not necessarily all these other things. So would you say that's step one? Then what was step 2 and 3 in order to actually start manifesting that freedom? Is it skipping Starbucks every week? Is it investing a percentage of your paycheck? Can you walk us through the game plan of, hey, I'm making decent money. I know that freedom is my priority. How do I bridge the gap into actually having financial freedom?
Yeah, you're never going to get rich or free by saving money, right? And the Starbucks thing, maybe you're not going to like scrimp enough to get free or wealthy. So what you got to do though is choose the vehicle that will lead you to freedom. I chose real estate because my dad had done a little bit. I understood it. It's very, I don't know, it just made a lot of sense to me. It seemed very real. And so I chose real estate. I bought some homes and I saw the value go up and I could rent them out for more than I'm paying. And there's just money coming in whether I worked or not. I was like, oh, this could be a road to freedom. If I buy enough cash flowing real estate, it pays my bills and I don't have to work, And the property values are going up and up and up and up. So it'll kind of keep up with inflation and lifestyle changes and things like that. And eventually these mortgages drop off and then I can retire. Like it just seemed like this perfect little machine for me to achieve financial freedom. But you got to choose your vehicle. For somebody else, it doesn't need to be real estate as an asset. That's one way to do it. But I know a lot of people that are building companies and selling companies on a multiple, or they go IPO, or they have a big buyout, or, whatever. And that can provide more money than cash flow will provide in a whole lifetime. You know what I mean? And so you can choose different vehicles, but what you got to do is like, which vehicle are you going to do? And then you'll prioritize that. And that might mean skipping Starbucks to save up to buy that next property, but there's a reason behind it. If all you do is scrimp and save and act frugal and learn to live really, really, really cheap, that's not going to give you freedom or give you wealth. You got to have a means to it, and real estate could be that. I always say your number one fiscal responsibility is to grow your asset portfolio. It's not to go make $5 million today. If you made $5 million today, what should you do with it? I would say go buy assets. That could be businesses, that could be real estate, that could be, maybe stocks, bonds, crypto, gold, whatever. Go buy things of value that will increase over time and pay you. And that's how you can achieve freedom. And there's lots of different vehicles, but pick a vehicle and then that'll guide a lot of what you do.
Yeah, I really like how you said that. I teach my guys this too. You don't want to save for a rainy day. You don't want to save money just to save it, like you said, because there's a bit of scarce energy there. You're scared that you're going to run out of money. You're holding on to it. And money's energy, just like everything else, right? If you allow it to come in, if you're abundance and you have that generosity, more will come. But if you're scarce and you're worried you're going to lose it, saving for a rainy day is probably going to come. I like the concept, and I think Grant Cardone said this, of a storage account, not a savings account. You get a storage account to put things in there temporarily to then use that storage, the items in that storage account, to go deploy that into something else. So I love the idea of a storage account. It's there temporarily to use to go deploy into an asset like you talked about. In your case, it was real estate. So walk us through that little transition. So you're making some money in direct sales, a couple $100K a year, 2, 3, 4, 5, 600, somewhere in that range, making good money. What did that process look like? Did you put down 20%, 10%? Obviously, you always had the mindset, but can you walk us through the actual tangibles of what it took to get to your real estate portfolio that's now generating enough where you have freedom?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I didn't really have the vision as good as I had along the way, or as I should have, but I dabbled. I knew it was important, so had some money. Yeah, bought a primary residence, 5% down, you know what I mean? And then it was like, okay, and then I did that again, bought another primary and kept the old one and rented that one out. And then I saved up 20% to put down on like an investment property. And then I found a seller finance deal I could get, cheaper. And so I dabbled, a deal every year or two. And then I was my goal was to buy one every year, but then I got distracted because I started making better money. And I'm like, this is a waste of time making $300 on this cash flow. I was missing the vision of the tax benefits and the appreciation and all the real upside of real estate. And I kind of stopped buying for a few years, which during the best buying years of our lifetime, probably. I'm like, gosh, I wish I hadn't. But so then after a few years, I did have, 3 or 4 properties, and they had gone up in so much value. I'd been knocking for about 10 years, and I ended up getting divorced. And it was like, okay, now I'm reframing my entire paradigm of reality in a lot of ways, mentally, emotionally, socially, like financially. It's okay, what do I do? How am I going to raise these 2 kids on my own without a partner there? And I was like, can't be out running big sales teams, be gone all the time. So I had to like shift everything. And then I was like, I looked at a bunch of different opportunities, and I was like, no, real estate, like that's where it's at. And I took a look at my real estate, and I ended up doing a huge cash out refinance and pulled out a ton of money from one of my primaries, and then just went and bought as much cash flowing property as I could. So in a matter of like 18 months, I went from like 5 units to 35 units. I bought a small mobile home park. I bought some duplexes and triplexes, and just went as hard as I could because I could see the writing on the wall. This was 2021, and that was when interest rates were climbing back up. And I was like, oh, like I got to sprint right now. I'm catching the tail end of a decade of good. And I got to make hay while the sun shines. And so I did. And then I've been slowly drip growing that since then, and just keeping it growing. But that was when I went the hardest. I went from like 5 units to like 35 in 18 months.
Love that, dude. A lot to impact there. But first thing I want to highlight is turning what a lot of people would be like one of the worst situations ever. Obviously, going through a divorce is tough, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's a relationship divorce or a business partner divorce, right? Like a big life shift like that, you chose to use that to create something positive out of it and reframe that energy to reevaluate your strategy moving forward. And that created, your career today and probably one of the biggest financial wins that you've had. That's first and foremost, the way that you frame situations and the meaning that you give it is extremely important. Second thing there, what is your relationship with leverage? It seems like in that moment you did a Hail Mary where you're like, I have all this equity that's stuck in my primary for being a good, salesperson and putting some money away and the market appreciating. And then you took a risk, leveraged all that, and then deployed it into, I imagine, cash flowing properties that are outside of your typical market.
Yeah.
Talk us through your relationship with leverage and what people need to know.
Love it, dude. Dude, good. I'm glad you brought those up. Those are two like huge things that have really changed my life a ton. You mentioned perspective and leverage. So I have this mantra or affirmation I say daily, and it's that all people and circumstances are my allies. And I love that because it's easy to start feeling bad for yourself and like, oh, the world's against me, or why did this happen, or this thing sucks. And I don't believe in like everything happens for a reason. That's just not. That like kind of makes my skin crawl. Yeah, the reason you're a dumbass or that person's a jerk. Like I don't really believe that there's like everything happens for a reason. But that phrase, all people and circumstances are my allies, they can be for my good, right? If you look in war, there's like an ally, and it's like you're not necessarily friends with that country, but like they can be your ally in helping you achieve your goal. And so there's some common respect and coordination there. And so, everybody can be my ally. Every circumstance can be my ally. Well, I'm making $1 million, losing $1 million, getting married, getting divorced. Like, how can this be my ally to facilitate a better life? So, yeah, I think perspective is huge, 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 huge. I'm a big, big fan of that. And I continually learn more the power of that. So anyway, yeah, so perspective is amazing. Leverage. I grew up, debt is the devil. Stay out of it at all costs. Like, it is the worst thing in the world. Like, never touch debt. And so I was very, very afraid of debt. And I agree with that sentiment as far as it goes with personal luxuries. But when it goes to assets, debt is hugely powerful, and it can be amazing. Yeah, so I had paid off my home. I'd paid off an investment property or two. Like, it was all debt-free. And then once I really dove into, we don't have to get into all the details, but the science of how real estate investing actually worked and how managing these assets work, and the benefit of having debt on properties for tax write-offs and leveraging to get multiple properties, I was like, oh my gosh, I've been doing it all wrong. But basically, I developed my safe debt guidelines where I can say, hey, if I leveraged debt, but I follow these guidelines, it'll be safe. So there's over-leveraged, which we've all heard that phrase. And to me, all debt meant over-leveraged. Like, oh, you shouldn't have debt. And I learned that there's a way to safely do it. If the asset can self-sustain and bring in a good, hefty cash flow margin, and you've got equity on it, and you have a cash reserve. You talk about not saving for a rainy day. I'm a big fan of having a cash cushion, though, right? Having a safety margin in everything you do is vital, I think. And so having a cash cushion, having some equity, and then having what I call a cash flow margin, where if I had to drop rents 20, 30, 40%, it would still be a self-sustaining asset that it could still pay for itself. Then you can really use that money to buy 10x the amount of properties, which means you're getting 10x the amount of depreciation and appreciation. And there's just so many more benefits than sitting there on one paid-off property. So yeah, I totally reframe my understanding of debt. And I still have never been in debt for, credit card debt or luxury items or for a big trip or anything like that, because that doesn't pay for itself. But debt that pays for itself and has a ton of other benefits, I had to reframe and change my relationship with debt big time on that.
When you initially bought all these properties, what were you looking for? Were you looking for cash flow? Were you looking for appreciation? How did you know where to look?
Yeah, just straight cash flow, because I was like, okay, I need X amount to live off of to pay for all my bills and support my kids and me and my life, my ex-wife and all these things. Like, I need this much money. So I was like, okay, well, I have this much money. I need this much coming in a month. So I needed like an 18.5% cash on cash return. So I was like, blinders on. I know I'm going to miss a ton of awesome opportunities, but I need to accomplish this year as soon as possible, or else I'm going back to the doors, which is great, but I didn't want to. And so I gave myself a time frame. I knew how much resources I had and what kind of return I needed to find. And so, yeah, I wasn't looking at anything but cash flow. And I bought, stuff all throughout the country, from New York to Hawaii, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Arizona, just everything. Wherever the numbers made sense, I was like, I'm going to buy it. And I'm like, and once I hit that, I'll have the bandwidth, the energy where I can step back. And now I can go to step 2 of my game plan and start buying more, like properties that I'm stoked on, places I'd want to live in, ones with intrinsic value and ones that'll appreciate and create bigger wealth. But first I had to get out of the rat race to give myself the time and the bandwidth to do the other things. And so, yeah, it was 100% focused just on cash flow. regardless of really anything else, which I'm not saying is the right way to do it. That's just how I did it. And it bought me my freedom. So then I could start to adjust my portfolio as I wanted down the road.
Yeah. I've heard both ways. I've heard cash flow is more of just the drip and it's the byproduct, and you shouldn't focus on cash flow because the real wealth is coming from appreciation. And obviously there's a lot of variables. It depends on the market. You know, you're in 2021.
Well, it depends on your goals. Because if you have an income, like who cares about the cash flow? If you're making, $600,000 a year knocking doors, who cares about the cash flow from some properties? Go buy things that are going to appreciate and grow real wealth. And, but if you're trying to live off of it and you have no other income, then that's all that matters. But again, it's knowing what phase you're in and what your goal is right then, and putting the blinders on and say, hey, I'm going to hit this goal right now, and then I can hit the next goal later when I'm in that phase. But be real honest with where you're at. If you're still in the grind phase and you got to work 20 hours a day or whatever, do that. And if you're not in that phase, stop doing that. And if you're in a cash flow building phase, do that. If you're in an appreciation building phase, do that. Just be really, real honest of where you're at, I think is important.
Is there I know you said that you're looking for a specific cash on cash return, but was there a certain dollar amount? Obviously, so you get a divorce, you're not looking to go back to your active income and running a team, which was door to door. So you're looking for a vehicle, real estate, which you already had a little experience in. You had a nest egg of money from the appreciation from your property in order to go find specific properties to get you a certain amount of cash flow that would exceed your overhead at the time. The strategy there, was it, because I'm trying to wrap my head around this, because me as well, I like the idea of cash flow. I like the idea of making enough money passively that eventually it will cover my overhead, because that's, for me, that's freedom. When you have
your work optional is what they say. Even if you're not retired, you could still be doing your grind, but like your work optional if you wanted to.
100%. But the strategy was always a little murky to me because, and again, it's a different climate right now in 2025. It's difficult depending on where you're trying to find to make enough money on a property where it actually moves the needle forward towards your goal. So were you looking for specific markets? I know you said you just basically opened up the US and you had some strategy with real estate and you're like, hey, this is cash flowing. Was that really the strategy?
That was it. I was literally like, I don't care where it's at, what it is, as long as it'll hit my cash flow number, I'll do it. Because it was hard to find then. It's even harder to find now. But I was like, if it'll hit the number, I'm going to buy it.
And then you just found resources there, handyman, maintenance.
Yeah, I tried to avoid rehabs. So I would do some little repairs, but just find somebody local on the ground. But I wasn't doing like full-on rehabs, which I could have been a lot more creative. And like, that's thing is like, what I did was really basic. Like I could have been a lot more creative. But so I avoid like major rehabs and just had like maybe a lot of my stuff was like kind of blue collar rentals. So a lot of blue collar people are cool because they can just do it themselves. You're just like, hey, you want to put a new swamp cooler in? They're like, yeah, my uncle runs a cool shop. And, so I give them money and they go do all the work. And so it kind of made it a little simpler for me.
What would you say is your average cash flow per property that you currently have?
I haven't run on my current portfolio, but I'd probably say around 20%, maybe a little more.
Pretty good, dude.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. But it's a mixed bag. A lot of these properties are, like I said, that blue collars. You also deal with, they're not living. You're talking about safety margins. Those people don't live on a margin. And so, if there's something goes wrong, their car breaks down, they're like late on rent that month. It's like, gosh, And so I kind of have like a couple A class, couple B class, majority more C class.
And all residential.
All residential. Yeah. Long-term residential. Is how I do all those,
I think there's so much content out there about real estate, just like every space, health, real estate, really anything, that there's so many different strategies. There's so many different people that are swearing by their strategies, syndications and multifamily and burr and flips, that I think people get a little bit lost in the sauce.
Yeah.
And it seemed like your strategy was very simplistic and very basic. You pulled the trigger at a really good time because of the money that you've accumulated and the freedom and leverage that you're able to create during their decade of door to door. In 2025, what advice would you give people maybe that were in your position? Maybe they're in a direct sales space, or they're in a small business that they're running and they're just to the point where they're looking to create more freedom. Maybe they have a dream business they want to launch, or they're trying to spend more time with their family. What would you tell those people in order to start on the path that you've created, a couple, 5-6 years ago?
Yeah. So one thing that's funny, with real estate, when people say, "Oh, I want to get into real estate," to me, that's like, I want to get into sports. I'm like, what's like football, skydiving, skateboarding? Like there's a big variety. Yeah. Like what does that even mean? Right. And the way you're going to train for these different sports is going to be very different. You're training for pickleball versus football. Like you're going to train differently. And so you need to get real specific on what your actual goal is. So this is what I tell anybody. I'm like, look, if you want to get into real estate, you got to be very clear. Like, what is your actual goal? Like, why do you want to do it? What's your time frame to achieve that goal? And what are your resources? If you can triangulate those three things, then you can create a real workout plan, if you will, right? You can really figure out your approach and your strategy and your style, but it's going to be tied to those three things. If let's say you want 10,000 a month to live off of, let's say 20,000, whatever. We'll say 10,000 a month. That's your goal. I just want 10,000 a month cash flow because then I'm work optional. Okay. Do you have 1 year to do that because you're ready to like quit your job? Or do you have 5 years to do that because that's when your exit will be? Or do you love your job and you're going to be there for 30 plus years indefinitely because you truly love it, you do it for free? That time frame will change everything with your approach. And then you go your resources. Do you have $500,000 you pulled out of a HELOC somewhere to go use? Or do you have $2 million from a buyout? Or do you have like an extra $20,000 a year you can scrimp and save, but that's all you got? Other resources beyond capital, like, can you raise money? Can you influence people? Do you have an uncle who's a builder? Do you have an aunt who's a property manager? Like, what are your resources? Because that can tie into how you'll approach it as well. They always say, look for your unfair advantage. So if you have an unfair advantage because you're in a certain market, or you like say you have certain connections, that's a resource too. What's your debt? Can you raise debt? Can you put debt in your own name? That's a resource. So look at your resources, look at your time frame, and look at your actual goal. And then the strategy kind of presents itself at that point. And the hard thing is most people are like, well, I want to make some money. And that's where it's back to like, I want to do real estate. Like there's a lot of ways to make money in real estate. You gotta figure out what your limitations are, and they'll guide you. There's this book, Never Play It Safe by Chase Jarvis. Have you read that one yet? It's brand new. Really, really good. I'd recommend everybody check it out. But he talks about one of the key things of being creative are constraints. If you have a pure open canvas, it's really hard. But as soon as you add a constraint, clarity comes in pretty good. They say, draw an apple. You draw an apple. They say, hey, draw something. You're like, sitting there for 20 minutes, like, I don't know what to draw. You know what I mean? So as soon as you know those constraints that I listed, the strategy will be a lot easier to clarify.
Love it, dude. What's your relationship with being retired? The word retirement, because it's a lot different on the Western philosophy than the East. And some people, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but some people, retirement, my parents, I'm retired. Don't say that. All right? It's not good. That's when you start to deteriorate. Sure. You're not looking for something. So having financial freedom at such an early age, what's your relationship with retirement? What do people need to know?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess semantics are funny. It's like, define it. I do that a lot in life. Like people are like, well, do you believe in God? I'm like, well, define God. Like, I don't know, like, what is love? Like, define it. I don't know. Like, do you love me? Define love. Like, you got to define a lot of things to be able to actually have a conversation about it. So if we want to talk about retirement, it's like, define retirement. There's work optional, which you could call retirement, kind of like, oh, you have enough money coming in that you don't have to work. And then there's actually just not working at all. And that's kind of the like retirement, not working at all, sitting there watching TV as your body breaks down. And then there's like retirement where I don't have like for me, it's like, I don't have a job that I go to. I don't have a commission. I don't have any set thing I have to go do, but I still take on projects. To me, it's like, ooh, I want to take down like an RV park this year. So now I have this project that I work on, and they have time frames, and I have to do work during that time frame. Then it's over. It's not a job, but I still can do projects. And sometimes they're just creative projects. Like I said, I came up with this children's book. It was a pet project, I was making for my son and daughter, and I had my buddy produce like a song for it, and it's like super dope. It has like these 90s punk vibes, but it's a kid's song. It's like, it's fun, right? You can take these projects on. So that's what I do with being retired, is do the things that I want to spend my time on. I'm definitely not sitting around. I want to train for an Ironman, and I go do these adventure races, and like, I love to do different projects. That's what I like to spend my retirement doing. Yeah.
I love it, dude. Yeah, my goal a long time ago was to make enough money where money isn't a big deal anymore, so then I can focus on what's really important.
Yeah.
You know, we spent the first half of the pod talking about money and the value and relationship to it, and it's just one of those things where I think if you put enough focus on it, specifically in your early ages, that you can realize that there's so much more than life than making money, but it's like one of those things that you can't really experience in that until you experience it.
Yeah.
It's like the Jim Carrey quote.
Yeah.
That, hey, I wish everyone could become rich and famous to realize that's not what it's all about.
Yep.
It's easy for you to say, I want to go experience it first. Let me go try. But that's been my pursuit. It's how do I make enough money? How do I climb the economic ladder long enough where I can really realize that this isn't what life is all about, but at the same time also not get lost in the sauce? Because I'm right there with you with what we were talking about earlier. Like, you can have enough to take care of your needs, but there's always that more and more mentality.
Yeah.
There's always that competition, accomplishment. I need more and more. So it's trying to find the balance and getting clear on what you want. Is it, I want to be the best ever? I want to be the best solar guy ever? I want to be the best real estate investor ever? Or is it, do I need a certain amount of income, a certain amount of assets, a certain amount of net worth, where then I can really kind of take a step back and focus on other dimensions of my life, not just creating wealth and money?
Yeah. And it's tricky. And honestly, a lot of people could do it a lot cheaper than they realize. Like, but it all depends on, like, say, also what level of luxury do you want to live at that retirement? You know, if you want to retire on a lower level of luxury, it's a lot easier and a lot faster. But if you want a really high standard, you know, where you want a private jet and be retired, it's like, you know, that's a little trickier. There's different standards, but. And that's where it goes, like you said, like you said, like, oh, I wanted money where money doesn't matter. I can focus on what really matters to me. It's like, what really matters to you? Maybe you could do that now. And I know a lot of people that could, but they won't, because they just feel this obligation to grind. I was talking to a couple buddies this weekend that both of them just went through like an exit with their company, and they weren't making hundreds of millions, but, you know, a couple million. And so they're comfortable at least for a while. And they both were talking about how they just had this. Well, the one was saying how he has this urge, like, I need to start like working again. Like, this is so crazy. And the other one is like, yeah, I keep reminding myself, I don't have to do anything. Like, I'm not obligated to do that because that's what's expected. But there's kind of this expectation. And everybody that gets to that point, they've grinded. We've all learned to work really, really hard. And so to shift the paradigm of like the self-identification, you know, Grant Cardone, I remember he was talking about like, your identity, like he talks about, like, it's your moral obligation to, you know, make money, and like you build your whole identity around that. And then now to have to like reframe all that, you really got to do some like internal work and change your paradigm. And it might not look cool to the world. They're like, wait, what are you doing, dude? You used to be a hustler, a grinder. You're making all this money, and now you're like sitting around like running barefoot, writing children's books. Like, what the hell are you doing with your potential, you know? And it's like, it's a change of paradigm.
What was that transition for you? I think that's really important, because I agree. We get so caught up, our identity becomes what we do, not who we are. And it's a very short line of, this isn't who I am, this is what I do. And I have to remind myself that as well. I've been doing direct sales for 12, 13 years, similar to like you did. And when solar's over, or direct sales is over, or I have a big exit, or whatever the case is, I have to really remind myself. It's almost kind of like a mourning of a past identity or a past image. What was that like for you, going from the hustle, the sales leader, getting recognition, feeling like you're accomplishing things, that instant gratification, to now taking a lot of that away and not having that same level of desire to go out there and build something, at least in that space? Obviously you're still in real estate, but what was that for you?
Yeah, it was weird, man. It's funny, you know, and I never quite had the like that dog in me that just was like, I want to go hard forever no matter what. And some people do. Like, you know, you like talk to the Todd Petersons or whatever, and they're just like
built different.
They don't care. It's really not about money or freedom or anything. It's just about this domination, you know. And maybe they were trained into that, probably. Like, I don't know. That was never really me. But I did really, really identify as like a hard worker and being reliable. Like, I showed up, like, out of those 10 years of knocking doors, and it was only summer sales, right? So most of my summers were 5 to 6 months long. I couldn't hit my numbers in 4 months, so I had to stay longer to hit my goal. I was very goal oriented. If I said I was going to hit a goal, I hit it no matter what it took. And I never missed a day. Like, not a wedding, not a funeral, not a birth. Like, I didn't miss a day during those 9 years during the selling season. And that was like kind of part of my identity. And so you really had to like shift. I was like, oh, like it's okay. It's okay. Like, I had to really change and, like, say, doing a lot of deep work of like, what are my true priorities? What really, really, really matters to me? And then you got to ask, like, am I doing this for me because it matters to me, or am I doing it because of what other people will think? And then there's this like ego balance, and you're like, am I avoiding it because of fear? You know, am I avoiding it because of what other people think, or just fear? And like, you just got to like get real honest with yourself in a lot of ways. But it takes some time alone in your head, man. And for me, I love trail running. Like, that was like a deep place where I could just be deep in the mountains, no one around, for hours on end, just in my own thoughts. And I'd have the best like realizations and thoughts and understandings and like insights while it's trail running. And there's a whole bunch of science. I was just listening to this Human Lab podcast about like how the brain function and body movement like are so interconnected. Like, it's wild that we sit in a chair for 8 hours in school to try to learn. It'd be so much better if we were like on a treadmill, like in a lot of ways. But yeah, so finding something that can put you in that state where you can do that deep thought and really get to know you.
Solitude is huge, dude.
Yeah.
You know, we were just had a conversation with someone about the difference between isolation and solitude. Outside looking in, it's the same practice, but completely different intention. Solitude is you're going to think, you're going to be by yourself, you're going to allow the stimulus from the outside world to melt so you can actually listen to your inner voice and focus on what you want, ask those questions and get that deep work. Where isolation is you're running away from something, you don't want to be around the community. What is your relationship between community and solitude? Because I think we all know that community is extremely important.
Yeah.
But at the same time, being alone is very important as well. How do you incorporate that balance? Is it the nature that you kind of bring yourself to? Is it the physical activity? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, good question. It's actually something I've been thinking about a lot lately because, you know, it kind of goes back to that quote, the Maya Angelou quote, is like, freedom to choose your obligations, not freedom from obligation. And that's why I think of the solitude. It's like, if the loneliness is forced upon you, that's isolation or loneliness, and that sucks. You know, if you're choosing it for a greater purpose, then it's like it's more beneficial, you know. But I think community is huge. And I didn't realize as much because when I was on, you know, sales teams or maybe I had a church community or I was going to school, and like there's just so much community. It's just there that like when I had my alone time, I was like, great. You know what I mean? This is awesome. And then I stopped working, stopped going to school, stopped going to church. And I was like, so much alone time. It was like, whoa, like I always thought I was like an island. Like, I don't need anybody. But then once I had nobody around, it was like, oh, wow, like this was a good opportunity to do some deep work. But after that was done, it's like, I really do crave and prioritize community more than I thought I ever did. Maybe I'm just getting older. I don't know. But I think community is really huge and vital. And if you can do it proactively and thoughtfully, even better, right? To find a community that fits. And that can be a work community, church community, friends. Like there's 1,000 different ways you can structure that. But having that is really, really vital. So you're not just living in your own head.
100%, man. Joe, do you believe in balance?
I do. I know like that's the thing. Everybody doesn't anymore. Like, no, there's no such thing as balance. There's grind time and then play time. And like, and I believe in that as well. But I think we can take it too far. I do think there's a time to sprint, you know, especially if you're in a really, really unique, special opportunity where it's like, let's say your company is like, you could have an exit in 3 years if you get it just right. Like, do that. That's not going to just fall across your lap. You've worked a decade. You're in that moment. You know, some people are just doing a job where they could leave. Even a lot of the sales guys, commissions guys, like if you know they're just doing a job, they could leave for 3 years, come back and be right where they're at because they're just making their own money off their own commission. It's like that's a different situation than somebody else. You can maybe choose a little more balance. But if you have something very unique and special, you know, you might need to be unbalanced. But it's still not good. It might be worth it. But imbalance is dangerous, and I think balance is important. And you got to choose. You see people lose their friends and their families and all the things that matter to them to make money. And it's like, I think balance is important. Although there might be opportunities and times where you strategically choose to be in balance, but do it carefully. Do it carefully. I love fear. I talk a lot about like fear and your relationship with fear. I like go rock climbing, and there's a time when you're rock climbing, do you rock climb at all, Steven?
Not really.
Okay.
I need to. Maybe you'll take me one day.
It's dope. Let's go, dude. We're in Vegas. Just amazing rock climbing here. But you get to the top of the route, and you've been climbing up this mountain, and you have to redo the rope work at the top. It's called cleaning it. You clip into the mountain and you redo the rope. If you do that rope wrong, because you actually have to like untie yourself from the rope, change the chains, and then retie yourself to the rope. If you retie yourself wrong or run that rope wrong, like you die. And so the fear is like very heightened to that moment. I say like fear is your friend. Like it keeps you alive. It's like pay attention to it because it will keep you alive. If you're scared of it and you ignore it or you run away or you throw your hands over your eyes, like that's not what fear is trying to do. It's saying, hey, you're in a situation, watch out. And so you should listen to it. So if you're ever going to be unbalanced, like pay attention, like listen to the things you need to do. Because you might be like, hey, let's say socially, family, like you sit down with your wife and your kids and you're like, hey, there's a timeline on this. There's a purpose for this. This is what we're going to get out of this. Get them bought in on it and then carve out. It's like, even though I'm going to be unbalanced, here are some non-negotiables. We will do this. I will see you this time. Like do it very strategically and carefully so that it doesn't just blow up your life and that you make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Because maybe you don't need to do it at all and you don't care and it's not worth it. And maybe all the people in your life are like, no, we're not willing to do this for 10 years. We'll do it for 3. And you go, okay, let me change my goals. Like whatever, like be very proactive and conscious and intentional if you're ever going to be imbalanced.
I love it. Joe, how do you stay so grounded? You seem like a very grounded person. Is that something that you've always had? Is that inner work that you've done? Is it because you leverage nature and outdoor and activity and you're able to do so many things you love? Like where does that grounded calmness, self-awareness come from, and how do more people dive into that?
I don't know if I've ever been told it quite like that. Thank you. I like that. I appreciate that compliment, and I do take it as a compliment. I think it's happened intentionally. A lot of study, a lot of time on the trails, or for me, like I said, trail running and other things. But I like to study stoicism and philosophy and understand how people think and how I think more. That's another thing. I'll just throw this out. I've been writing in my journal, and sometimes I'll even tell myself like, oh, people got to really do this. And I'm like, this is a journal for me. Why am I saying people should do this because I'm like, no, I need to do this because like in this world of influencers and podcasters, and it's like, we're always like, hey, everybody, like we're talking to other people and it's all third party. It's like, talk to you.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, what do I need? Anyway, that's kind of a tangent, but yeah, just being conscious about it and taking that time to understand what makes me tick, how I view the world, why I do what I do, truly what my priorities are, what makes me happy. And it's almost unromantic how programmed I can be. Like all these cheesy things, like if you get sunlight in the morning and you move your body and you stretch and you do these things and like, then you're happy. And I'm like, it really works.
Yeah,
like
it does.
almost like freakishly. I'm like, oh, I'm just a computer. Like if I just do XYZ, I will feel light years better. And if I don't do that, I'm like, I'm off, So finding that formula, like what do you need to do on a daily to like feel good and be peak, and then prioritize that. But really getting to know yourself. But taking time away. Sometimes you do need to just close the doors from all the noise and be like, what do I need right now? Like going back to my real estate journey, I wasn't in the real estate space. I wasn't running podcasts or doing interviews or doing all that stuff when I was sprinting at that 2021 run. And I know if I had known then what I know now about real estate and been in the space that I'm in now, I couldn't have done it. I like put on this little ignorant mask, blinders up. I didn't ask anybody how to do it. I just put on my blinders like, I'm going to figure it out. I read all the books. I studied it all. I created my own asset analyzers, ran all the numbers. I figured out the science, and I just put on the blinders and I did my thing. But so many times, because we have so many resources now, we're like, hey, can you like tell me, and influence me. It's like you got to shut all that off once in a while and just like go figure out what you need to do that, and regularly, right? It's like you need to regularly fast for your body to reset. You need to regularly fast from mental stuff as well.
Ignorance on fire is better than knowledge on ice. I love that quote. There's so much information out there, and there's, to your point, right? Like you may have not pulled the trigger because you may have second guessed yourself because you had too much information, or you asked a real estate mentor what he should do and he told you his perspective and this guy told you his perspective. Where I agree with you, dude. I think a lot of our challenges and a lot of our big things that we need to figure out in our life can be found by just getting into a quiet place, maybe doing yoga if that's for you. Like I love walks.
I love yoga.
Yoga's great. I added walks into my morning practice now.
So underrated.
Dude.
Especially if you throw a weight on there, but like walks are so underrated. They're so good for every part of you.
And anyone can do it. And I do it more for my mental than my physical, but I can't have a bad day. If I wake up in the morning, I know I do the things that I need to. I go on a little bit of walk. I'm present. I channel gratitude.
Love that.
It's cheesy, but it's true, dude.
Dude, gratitude is money. Like that, everything's better with gratitude.
Why do you think most people don't actually apply all these life feeling good principles? Because like you just mentioned, it's not a matter of resources. You can go on social media and say how to be happier, how to make more money, how to invest in real estate, how to get a better morning routine, how to do anything, and there's going to be hundreds of thousands of videos that'll teach you. But then when you look at statistics, you look at people's lives from a fitness, from a fulfillment, from financial, people are hitting lower numbers than before all these resources. What do you think it is?
Two things, and again, caveat, like I don't know shit. Like I'm just me. These
just
are my opinions. Like I don't know anything, but I'd say two things. One is it's not built into our rhythm of life. It's wake up, go to work, come back, do the whatever, like, go to the bar. I don't know what people do, like, but it's not baked into our rhythm of life. And I think we're starting to see a shift in that, which is cool. But most people are just too busy to really work it into their rhythm. Well, they could, but it's harder. It's not the norm. And so they're just not trained in it. And then the other thing is a lot of times it's boring. It's not the big high. Like I was just talking to one of my students and he's talking about, he's like, dude, I hit all these real estate goals this year and it wasn't exciting. And he's like, why is that? I'm like, because it's not that exciting. like he's used to going out, setting a sales goal, hitting that sales goal, getting a huge payday, getting a Rolex and a cruise out of it, getting praised by his peers. And they're like, like that's the fulfillment we want. But when you just go buy 9 doors, like, and then they're cash flowing a little bit, but you're making hundreds of thousands over here, there. It doesn't shift anything. It's kind of boring. And that's kind of how the daily walk and journaling gratitude, it's just kind of like, there's no fire. We want boom, you party, you get drunk, you get high, wherever you have sex. It's like, where's the orgasm? Where's the climax? We want the excitement. But a lot of the balance stuff is just kind of boring, and you just got to work into your rhythm of life.
Delayed instant gratification. Delayed instant gratification is a superpower.
When it's just not as heightened either. Like I found that I get the gratification every day. It's so subtle that it's not like I don't recognize. I'm like, oh, it's not this exciting heightened thing, because that's not balance. Like that messes up your nervous system if you're constantly on this adrenaline high. You know what I mean? It's not healthy.
You brought up the Stoicism point, which I'm a big fan of Stoicism as well. Marcus Aurelius and just their whole philosophy.
So good.
I feel like I'm too stoic in some scenarios where it benefits my work, it benefits my business, my profession. Like you can't catch me on a bad day. Doesn't matter what happened to me the morning before or the night before or what's going on in my personal life. Like when I show up at the office or I show up on a phone call, you can't tell. I'm the same person. I never get too high, I never get too low, which is a superpower to some degree because you're stoic and people know what to expect from you. You're very consistent in the way that you show up, which is important because in leadership or really any relationship you want someone to show up the same way. You don't want one day he's freaking out and the next day he's ready to give you a hug. But I've noticed if I'm being a little vulnerable in my relationship, it's actually a little bit challenging because I am a little bit too robotic. I am a little too problem solving. I am a little too, okay, here's the issue. Let's figure out what's going on Do you think you could be too stoic, or do you think it is beneficial in most areas of life?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's funny. And on the surface of stoicism, it seems that that's what stoicism is. Like, oh, like, the strong, hard man. That's definitely like the thought that most people have, but the deeper you study it, you see it's having a relationship with your emotions, being aware of your emotions. The Stoics were not unaware of their emotions.
But not letting it control you.
But yeah, it's not letting it control you. And I would say that not a caveat, but another way to look at it is like the difference between like gaslighting yourself that you like something you hate, you're to kind of convince yourself because that's positive, or actually focusing and having true gratitude for the things that truly are good. So for instance, let's say there's 10 things going on in a day and 7 of them suck, right? And 3 are dope. The false positivity, the false stoic just kind of just doesn't look at any of the 10 and just does the work. The false positive guy goes, oh, those 7 things it hated, I loved that. It's good. I like it. And it's like, no, you didn't. Your nervous system knows you're lying to you. The true positive, good perspective, I would say the true stoic would go, those 3 things, oh, so dope. I'm so grateful these things happen. Like, I'm so glad. And because of this and this and this, and they don't give voice and they don't give power to the negative 7. They focus on the 3, but they're not gaslighting themselves and lying about the 7. They're not ignoring all 10, but they're really giving voice and power to the 3. It is something that I've come to realize of how I can stay positive without it being bullshit, And there are times where you need to address some hard things and the negative things to adjust them and to fix them. But if they're just like average negative things, like I don't think they really need power. And I'd say one last caveat with that is once something has been addressed and like, let's say, it's a loss of a loved one, something heavy, that's not going to go away. But if you've mourned it, you've felt the pain, you've gone through the process, there is a time where you don't have to focus on it anymore. Some people go, oh, I felt it again. Now I have to focus on it. If you've never mourned it, though, you've never been through the process and what my therapist would say, metabolized it, had it break down and go through you, then it's going to fester. That's a problem. So you do need to process it. But once you have, now move on and focus on the good.
The human experience, dude. The good, the bad, the joy, the ugly. That's just what it is. And yeah, processing is super important in lots of different ways. I think getting mentorship, getting counseling, life's tough, and it can be. And if you don't have the right resources and you don't have the right operating system and you haven't done the deep work that we've talked about, you can really find yourself getting lost in the sauce. And I think a lot of people that we're seeing, a lot of the symptoms, a lot of the manifestations of what we see in the world and in America and even microcosm in our own individual businesses, lives, and relationships are a byproduct of people just not having the right resources, not having the right tools that they've learned along the way of life to process and to overcome. And back to the original question, not having the right perspective in order to reframe the things that are happening to them.
Well, and it's scary. And I love sales. I think sales is powerful. I think you learn so many life skills. Genuinely, it set me up for life. I do want to give a warning to everybody in that world is you are training your brain. You talk about, oh, maybe this is kind of hurting certain parts of my life. You train your brain to kind of be disconnected from reality. Someone slams a door in your face, you're just like, whatever. Like, they say no. Okay. Like, you don't hear it. Like, you're literally like, listen to me, guys. Anybody's just like, especially when you've been doing this year after year after year after decade, like, you can retrain your brain to disconnect from reality because that's what you're doing to be able to sell better. And that can be very dangerous, like you said, when it comes to your personal lives and things like that. And so it's a superpower in one area, but like, be careful of what you're training your brain to do. And you need to find a way to correct that. Because I know too many guys that have just got so deep in the world, like they can't even see what other people are really feeling and hearing and experiencing and empathizing. Because it's harder to sell. It honestly is just harder to sell if you're thinking about their feelings and the empathy and all that stuff. You're just trying to hit your numbers. It takes a lot of emotion and mental to go through that. And so we train ourselves not to. And it's like, just like you can train yourself to be positive and train yourself to be good. And like you can train yourself to work on that muscle and make it too strong. And you gotta be, I remember like having to reprogram my mind, dude. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's how I was viewing the world. And you don't want to admit that to yourself either, you know? And then you're like, wait, am I going to lose my edge if I do that? Like, it's a tricky balance, you know?
Duality.
It's hard.
For every positive, there's always a negative.
Yep.
That's an interesting way to look at it. Dude, Joe, we can talk for hours about a range of different topics.
Sure.
You've been amazing, dude. My last question for you. If the person you are today could go back in time, back to maybe before you started door to door, or around that same time when you were trying to figure it out, coming from a poor family, money motivated, what advice would the Joe today give the 10, 15-year-old Joe to accelerate his growth, his happiness, his joy, and just to have a better life?
I would say a couple things. If I just was speaking financially, I would go back and say, hey, make sure you're building things that you own. You know, and if you're a high commission sales ticket, go make a ton of money and then go buy real estate or buy businesses. I'm not saying don't do, I think high commission sales, like even if you don't own the company, it can be amazing. It's actually probably easier. A lot of times, you know, you've had businesses, a lot of times the reps are making a lot more than the owner for many, many, many years, right? Sure. So you can sprint with that, make those big bucks and go buy stuff that you own right away. Year 1, year 2, build things that you own is advice I would give to everybody. And then the next thing I'll just say, be wise about your knowledge acquisition. What are you spending your time learning? Be very smart about that. Be conscious about it. Be intentional and proactive about what you're spending your time learning.
Sound advice, dude. Joe, where can people get connected? Maybe they want to lock into the pod. Maybe they want to join your community. Where can people find you?
Yeah, just my website, just my name, Joseph F. as in freedom, Jensen, josephfjensen.com. And then that has the links to like my socials and any projects I'm working on, books or groups or whatever. So just www.josephfjensen.com.
Love it. You guys trying to expand your real estate knowledge, get some mentorship, and start putting some of that active income into passive income, definitely hit up the dude. He's the man, expert in the field. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you on next week's episode. Joe, you're the man. Appreciate you, dude.
Thanks, Steven. Appreciate it.
See you guys.